I'm Greg Boulos, and I'd like to welcome our listeners to the first ever Boulos Company podcast. The Boulos Company is Northern New England's largest commercial real estate services firm with offices in Portland, Maine, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We've been selling and leasing real estate in Maine and New Hampshire since 1975. The goal of this podcast series is to provide insight into the real estate side of Maine's movers and shakers, providing a perspective on our guests you might not have known. And speaking of guests, I'd like to introduce Gray Maine native Fred Forsley.
Good morning.
Fred is the very definition of an entrepreneur. Good morning, Fred. Fred's been involved in a number of business startups involving real estate development, recycling, healthcare, direct response marketing, and the food and beverage industry. At age 19, Fred started Fred Forsley Realty and became one of the youngest real estate brokers in Maine to own his own firm. Following that, he assisted in the development of the largest recycling operation in the state. Forsley also founded Liberty Financial Group, which is involved in syndicating government housing projects. In addition, Forsley is the president of Harborview Properties, a 20-broker real estate firm with offices in Portland and Falmouth, Maine. He is also a principal partner in a new office and hotel development in Portland's East End next to the Residence Inn. Most notably, Fred is the founder and owner of Shipyard Brewing Company, the largest brewery in the state of Maine and a national leader in the craft brew industry. Shipyard grew out of the Kennebunkport Brewing Company and Federal Jack's Restaurant and Brew Pub, which Forsley began in 1992 as a way to turn around a troubled retail development in Kennebunk, Maine. These two businesses became the centerpiece of the property and continue to prosper today under Forsley's guidance. In 2001, Forsley purchased the Sea Dog Brewing Company, which has grown into a nationally recognized brand, boasting award-winning beers and 9 brew pubs stretching from Maine to Florida. He also owns and operates 4 Shipyard pubs, a seasonal inn on Peaks Island, a commissary kitchen, as well as Ice Pick, a vodka company. Forsley is a graduate of Cheverus High School in Portland and the University of New Hampshire with a degree in business administration. He sits on several boards in Maine and has won numerous awards surrounding his business successes as well as philanthropic work. Most importantly, Fred is a very good and longtime friend, occasional travel partner, and godfather to my daughter, Drew. Welcome, Fred.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm excellent. Excellent.
Hey, Fred, in addition to being president and co-founder of Shipyard, I'm willing to bet most people don't realize you're also a major player in the commercial real estate field. What was the first piece of property you purchased, and how old were you?
The first piece was in Morrill's Corner, and it was a building, a commercial building on the corner in Morrill's Corner in Portland, and it was known as the Cappy's building at the time, and it was owned by Plasmine, which was a chemical company, and I bought that and got lucky enough to sell it 24 months later and doubling the investment. So that kind of sprung me. Yeah, so it wasn't a house, it was a little commercial.
A brick building, as I recall, right?
It was a brick 2-story building, yes.
And there was a Liz's Laundry in there.
Right. My sister Elizabeth, what happened was it was actually a Bigelow Maytag Laundry. There was a gentleman, Mr. Bigelow, who wanted to open up a business, and he opened the laundry. Long story short, he realized he couldn't deal with being in business, and he ended up turning it over to me, and we changed the name, my sister Liz. So it was the first laundromat business and the last I've been involved in.
And that says a lot.
Yeah.
So what kind of properties do you own now? You sold that after 24 months.
Yeah. Actually, there was a deal that you helped me with on that I owned and sold that I bought from who's become one of my best friends, Gordon Richby. Is I bought a building in Woodford's Corner and did a similar thing, renovated it and sold it. And I think you may have even owned that at one time. But
630 Forest Avenue.
Right, and that was one of the second deals. And presently, I own a property in Kennebunkport, Kennebunkport Harbor. Kennebunk, it's 8 Western Avenue, which is the birthplace of Shipyard Ale, a spot where Federal Jack's is. We've owned that property for close to 30 years now. And I own a Fisherman's Wharf, which is Central Wharf in Portland, which is in front of Chandler's Wharf and is a major, right now it's a parking lot, but also where there's there's tourist boats that go out from there, and there's a Portland Lobster company there, and that's become a little bit of a center of interesting debate right now, because we're trying to develop that with the Batemans and some other world-class developers, and there's people that are causing some issues on moratoriums and things like that, because there's a fear of not being able to coexist with fishermen, and I firmly believe that we can. But that's an interesting piece we have. And then the major development that we have is where the brewery is in Portland, which you, Greg, brought an amazing tenant to us, Vet's First Choice, and we're developing a major building there. And
now known as Covetrus.
Covetrus, yes, Covetrus. And long story short, that's a property that I actually bought through the Boulos company back in '94. I believe that it's the two brokers that work still with you, Tony McDonald and Dan Greenstein, actually sold me that property, and we got a TIF, and at the time was a great brownfield site, and now it's the home of where there's a Marriott Residence Inn, and we're doing the 170,000 square foot office, 106 room hotel, and 360 cars, and then 9 condos. So it's kind of a, and we've worked very closely with the Boulos company, Greg, you specifically, and other brokers to bringing those two major users to the property. And it's been a world-class experience. And at times it was pretty touch and go on whether the deal was going to happen. But long story short, there were a number of moments that you weighed in and made that deal happen. And it's like you pointed out to me, it's the single largest tenanted building in the city and maybe the state. That's a private
built
deal.
in the last 25 years. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So going back to that site, that was the old Crosby Laughlin site.
Right.
And when Tony and Dan sold you that property, how many acres total? Do you recall?
It was 4 acres, a little over 4 acres, and we actually split off a piece to the McCucci's. They were family friends, and they took a piece of the parking lot, and then we sold another piece to the city for a street that is now Hancock Street that goes all the way. It wasn't right through the property, and then we did the deal with Marriott Residence Inn, putting a hotel on that site, 180 room hotel, which is one of the largest Marriott residences inns in their chain. But and then most recently, this development we just mentioned.
And did the original site, did it include where the AC Marriott Hotel is?
No, that was property the city had, and where the parking garage was, that's even a longer situation. I was involved in the parking garage and the building of the parking garage, and we actually spent $1.5 million to mitigate odor from the pump station down there, which really changed that neighborhood, because it was a terrible odor at least 3 or 4 times a day that you'd smell from the pumping station. A lot of people don't see it, but there's a stack that goes up through the garage. And long story short, part of that deal, the city agreed to sell the land where now AC Hotel is on, and we had some complicated right-of-ways that we needed to solve going back to the 1800s with a budding Portland company, and we put those 2 or 3 pieces of property together, and then that ultimately was sold to the group that did the AC Hotel and the condos there.
Sounds like that'd be a great case study for Harvard College Business School.
There were a lot of different interesting twists in that deal for sure.
So when you bought the Crosby Laughlin site, what year was that again?
94.
So 94.
1994.
I think you paid like $350,000 for it.
It was actually $175,000.
That's amazing. So
yeah, because of my background with Gordon Herchabees and working with waste management and dealing with complicated sites, Gordon helped me and a few other key people deal with. There was a lot of waste issues with the site. It was technically a brownfield site, and we ripped down like 4 buildings and took out asbestos and took out other chemicals that were there, and a lot of people were afraid of it because of the brownfield site. But one thing I did with Gordon, he was one time the largest recycler in the state, and he owned the secure landfill in Norwich Walk. It was called Consolidated Waste Services, and I spent a lot of time dealing with environmental issues around the state and New England, and learned quite a bit and knew who to hire and get involved in that deal. And Gordon assisted in making that deal happen. So it took us about 24 to 36 months to get it all cleaned up. And
but just to put perspective on it, even though you had to put money into the site to get it up to standard,
yep.
You paid $175,000 for 4 acres with some buildings. Now today, a 1 acre site down there will go for $4 million or $5 million. So you had some pretty good foresight.
Right. Yeah,
Was it the brokers who caused that foresight, or was it your own vision?
You know, I'll never forget bringing your brother Joe down, and there were like 9 brokers. We walked through the whole building. They looked at me and go, I don't know what the hell we're going to do down here. No, everybody, I think the biggest thing brokers saw, and I saw, was the fact that we had all ocean views. You know, the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Casco Bay is 365 islands, theoretically. They call them the Calendar Islands, but we're 200 miles closer in Portland to Europe. And one of the reasons why Portland was developed as a major port before New York was the fact when you're into sail, it was the closest port to England. Consequently, that's why the trading between the UK and the US and some of those things. So in a major storm, Portland becomes a benefit to ships today coming in. You'll see if there's a hurricane out there, a couple big, cruise liners will come into Portland. And the beauty of that bay is world class. I mean, you can go all over the world, and I think you see it from the Eastern Prom. So I think being on the ocean was always something that felt eventually the value would be there. And the city at the time had some visions for cleaning it up, and which was a good thing as well.
Going back to 1992 or whenever it was, did you foresee the development that's happening there now?
I hate to sit here now and say, yeah, I felt it would happen.
Well, we'll believe you, Fred.
Yeah. I did believe that Portland, having gone to Cheverus and seen and traveled and really saw what was going around in the country, and that Portland, downtown Portland could be a great place to live and work. And today I think we're at a tenth of what we can be if the city allows it and people embrace the complexity of having, more hotels and more second homes and have more cultural workforce housing. And it's going to take some zoning changes and flexibility. And I think the Boulos company will be a big part of helping make that happen. So
we hope so.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Fred. So you bought Crosby Laughlin site primarily to move your business there, right? The Shipyard Brewery?
Right. We had actually bought in 92. We took over which was a failed real estate deal, and actually I think the Boulos company was managing it at the time.
By the way, that's not why it failed.
No, that didn't. but which is true. But I ended up working with the Boulos company when they were managing that, and my partner Gordon happened to be involved in the deal, and I had to go to the bank and work out.
This is one in Kennebunk. It was known as the Shops.
It was called Riverview Shops at the time, and it had experienced some neighbor issues. There were literally 6 lawsuits surrounding the site, and the neighbors blocked one of the entrances, so it didn't. There was a successful seafood operation in there. It was called the Lobster Deck, and other than that, there wasn't much that was making it, and it was right on the ocean again. And so the property had been foreclosed on, and my partner Gordon wanted me to try to deal with the banks because they were coming after him. There were like 9 other partners, but he was the only one that had the financial wherewithal for them to try to recover some of their losses. And so we bought the mortgage and foreclosed on, and did a 2-year legal process of clearing up the title, which was kind of complicated at the time, but we won every lawsuit. But it was the timing of it that really hurt the present owners, which kind of forced it into a foreclosure. So we were then sitting there with a half-vacant property, and I was down visiting my brother Richard in Pensacola, and we were at McGuire's Irish Pub and Brewery, which you and I have been to a number of times. I was there with Gordon, and I said, Jesus, they had just opened up a brewery. Long story short, I thought this would work in Kennebunk. I came back home, and as I got a hold of the guys at Gritty McDuff's, it had just opened up, and I met Richard Pfeffer, and he came down and looked at it, and Eddie Stebbins, and they introduced me to Alan Pugsley. They were going to put a brewery there. At the last minute, they decided they didn't want to do it. So next thing you know, I went to the tenants that had the lobster deck, and they were going to do it with me. And then as we were opening, they basically decided they didn't want to do it. So next thing you know, as a real estate guy, I'm running a brewery in Kennebunk in 1992, this summer, June of 15th. I'll never forget it. I'm standing there, and they're like, "We're not going to run it." So next thing you know, I'm running.
I remember telling you, Fred, I thought you were doing it backwards.
Yeah.
Exactly. What do I know?
Exactly.
I gave birth to Shipyard.
Right. Yeah. So the funny thing was, we named the complex the Shipyard because of the shipbuilding history of Kennebunkport, and we first named it Shipyard Shops, and then the name of the beer came after. We had individual names that we called the beers, and so it's been a great platform because we've ended up owning 5 or 6 of our other locations. We do rent some, but recently we just opened up in Treasure Island, St. Pete, Florida, is right near a little island called Treasure Island, and most people don't know where it is, but it's right near Tampa, and it's kind of a similar model as Federal Jacks, and so we own the real estate down there. But it's a lot of the things that I've learned along the way from friends like you, Greg, and Gordon and others about real estate. It's location is if you can, and people are drawn to the ocean and the water. So that's
And so you bought the Crosby Laughlin in Portland because you wanted to expand Shipyard?
At the time, we were brewing in Kennebunk, and it's a 7-barrel system there, and we needed a 50 or 100 barrel, and we needed space because the more you brew, the more space you need. And we were brewing 3 times a day in Kennebunk, and we actually looked in Connecticut. We looked in other parts of Maine, and that property, I had owned a location on India Street where Commercial Fruit used to be, or Food Works was, and I knew about the Crosby Laughlin plant because we used to go to the Village Cafe all the time and see it working. And the odd thing, like a lot of people from Gray used to work there. So I'd seen the plant, had never been in it, but it had been vacant for 15 years. So when I found out, I remember standing there with Dan Greenstein trying to sneak into the fence because the place was completely abandoned, and they had a lot of people living in it, homeless people and other people that were having raves in there and parties and stuff. So that's kind of a funny.
So it could be said you're responsible for displacing some of the homeless?
Exactly. The day we were supposed to close, we were down there, and I said to the guy who was in Denver, he was a lawyer, and I said, "Listen, we can't close until you get the people out of there." And he said, "What do you mean the people?" I said, "Well, the people there's like 3 different groups living in that building." He says, "I've been paying a security company for the last 9 years to keep people out of there." I said, "Well, you should get a refund." So he had to get the Portland Police Department to go down there and literally get and they had tapped into the electricity underneath where the residence is now. They had tapped into the electricity. And then the funny thing is we went through that building in January before we closed, and there was like a stream of water coming through the building. They had cut off a water pipe, and the water was running downhill for years. so anyways, it was pretty funny because they had stripped all the copper out of the building, and but we still have a little piece of the artwork, the graffiti that they had throughout the whole building. There was a young group of people who used to do graffiti and party in there, and so it's a pretty, to me, it has a unique connection because it was the birthplace of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and he was born the same year the Federal Jack was built. The Perkins family built 2 ships, the Federal Jacks, and one of them was built the same year that Longfellow was born. So it's interesting that
and there's a monument down there to him, or a plaque, right?
Yeah, it's the stone of his uncle's, taken from his uncle's farm of where the house was where he was born. His mother was staying with her sister at that house because his father was either off at war or something. I don't know exactly where it was. But,
right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Portland for a second. A lot of people talking about a shortage of parking in Portland. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's going to inhibit growth?
I think Unified Parking, actually, they've managed our parking in Kennebunk, and they've managed the Fisherman's Wharf parking lot, have done an amazing job of maximizing parking down there because they've taken a lot of lots that have been typically just people would tow and not charge anybody, but they wouldn't allow anybody to park there. And they figured out how to get owners to open up those lots either after hours or on weekends or whatever. And I personally think parking has a way of finding its level. I think I know the city's working on a bus plan where people will be more apt to park outside the city and take a bus that might be something that people would engage. I think that, when we grew up and there was the car oil crisis, we had to carpool. I mean, I think people will, in reality, people think it's expensive to park in Portland now, but when you compare it to other cities, it really isn't. And I think there are times when it's an issue, but overall, I wouldn't let that stop development. And you look at the city, there's a lot of developable property. There's a lot of ways that the city can work with private individuals to overcome these challenges. And it's never been a more exciting time in Portland if people acknowledge the fact that, all uses can participate together. You can have housing with fishermen. You can mix and blend a lot of different uses other than major industrial or things that have odor or whatever. And Portland will be a great place to live and work. And you look at the waterfront, there's a great deal more potential for dockage to be developed if you really wanted. There's the whole inner harbor and outer harbor on the Eastern Prom going into, at one time people talked about dredging Back Bay. I think Howard Goldenfarb mentioned that, but I could see those things benefiting, our next generation and our kids if we maximize what we have there. The uniqueness of that peninsula and the fact that it's designed and set up the way it is has a lot of potential for growth.
What do you see as some of the positives going forward for the development in Portland?
I think we've done a great job updating the airport. I think we're getting more flights directly into the airport, which makes Portland, connected to the world. I think Boston's success and the dynamic, as crazy it is, the Patriots being world champions the number of times they are, and the Red Sox, it makes Portland and makes Maine an attraction because we're right next to Boston, and people have heard and seen our brand globally. And what you're seeing in Maine now is a lot of people from all over the world coming. And when you sit on Commercial Street and watch one of those ships come in and you see the dynamic different groups of people, and then I know for a fact that people have bought second homes here because they've enjoyed Portland, it's going to keep opening up our world. And you have WEX and you have these other Covetrus come in there, and we know Sun Life wants to go down. There's others, but the reality is Portland, you can get anything you want from a big city. I mean, if you love theater, you can get that in Portland. If you want education, you've got USM, University of New England, Portland School of Art, and you have a lot of access to individuals here that some are here. And basically the world visits Maine in the summertime. Whether the movie stars going to, Bar Harbor, to people coming to Kennebunkport. Now, Portland is a tourist town as well as a business town. And because it's a tourist town, you're getting exposed what the Bateman Group had done out on Great Diamond, and what, we have the Inn on Peaks out there. It opens up where people will come here and spend a week, where 20, 30 years ago, no one would ever think coming to Portland and spend a week in the summertime, because they'd go to, Old Orchard, Kennebunkport, Bar Harbor, Booth Bay.
They drive right by the Portland exit on the way up to Bar Harbor.
It hit me over the head one time when I was in Kennebunk, and I'm talking to a guy, and he was from Australia, and he said, "Yeah, I'm going to go up to Booth Bay, then I'm going to go to Camden, then I'm going to go to Bar Harbor." And I said, "Well, why don't you stop in Portland?" He said, "Where's Portland?" I mean, he had no idea that Portland was the major city, and he just didn't, for whatever reason, the materials he was reading this was probably 15 years ago, but we have some of the greatest restaurants in the world, and you can travel the world and not get the experiences that, whether it's sushi restaurants, whether it's, Italian, any cuisine today, we're playing at a high level. And
people come to Portland just for the restaurants in many cases, or to take not the Brutel, but the tours of the breweries.
Yeah.
Throughout the state.
And that is, I don't know, it's 10 years ago, we got a grant from the state, the Maine Brewers Guild. And I was president at the time. And we got them to give us a grant for $10,000. And we did a Brewers Trail map so that we mapped out. And at the time, there were 33 breweries. And today, there's 99 breweries in the state of Maine. And we have some of the best in the world in Portland, Maine. My partner, Alan Pugsley, is English. We've developed a relationship with Marston's in England. Every year, we bring over 10 to 30 people from England, and they experience Portland, and they just fall in love with it.
And you're selling beer in England, aren't you?
Yeah. Shipyard's the number one on-premise craft beer, U.S. craft beer in the U.K.
Isn't that kind of like selling ice to the Eskimos?
It is, but it's really kind of funny, but it's great because of it's really creativity of the hops that we've created in the U.S. that they haven't really done in Europe at the level that we have in the U.S. And it's really exciting to see where the beer scene is. But now we're getting the distilled spirit scene is really blowing up in Portland. And then, you have a variety of other cutting edge drinks that people are doing.
Like Ice Pick.
We've got a brand, Ice Pick Vodka. Sean Corbett's president of that. And he's a young kid that worked for me in Bangor and down in Kennebunk. And he had the idea to get into the spirits side of things. And we had the name Ice Pick that we had for a tea beer we had done one time. So long story short, it's been booming. So we're just selling it in Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Florida, but we're trying to take it throughout the country. So,
it's a great name,
yeah.
Ice Pick.
Yeah.
Hey, Fred, looking into your crystal ball, 10, 20 years from now, what do you see happening in Portland, Greater Portland? Any gut feel?
My feel is that we will continue to grow our people. I mean, I think the attraction to the city and the services. 3 years ago I would have said something different, but by Wex and Covetrus, I got to get that right here.
Formerly Vets First Choice.
Vets First, yeah. I mean, when you see people like Ben Shaw, David Shaw, them making a major move, and that is going to spark other biotech firms to want to come to Portland.
Spin-offs, yeah.
That's going to, and honestly, the last 24 months with what's happened at USM, there's a new president there, Glenn Cummings, and Glenn is a guy that's got vision and passion for Portland, and I think we'll see that school grow and be a resource for the next 20, 30 years for people that want to be entrepreneurial in Portland. There's the thing that concerns me about Portland right now. I think we have to get involved in politics more aggressively, because right now there's an anti-growth, anti-development. Being in business is bad, I think, to a lot of people for whatever strange reason. I'm not sure, but if we're allowed, I think you could have a 12-month period of time where every month is strong in Portland, where right now, January, February, March, and April, you lose a lot of people. But if we can get businesses to locate downtown again and get it growing, sparked by these 3 or 4 new businesses down there, I think you're going to see Portland become a city versus a big town. And that's really what we need is for Portland to be a city that accepts everything. I don't think we'll lose the working waterfront. I think we can coexist down there. I do feel we need to address some major issues that we have with how we're managing opportunity for the homeless and really addressing some of those things. But overall, Portland is just a great city to live and work and bring up kids and experience. One thing you see is a lot of kids coming back in their late 20s and 30s because they're getting married and they want to bring up kids in an area. And when you look at other parts of the country, our school systems are some of the best, and that a lot of people won't send their kids to public school in a lot of parts of the country. And right now, Portland, the school system is still a top priority for a lot of people, and surrounding towns have great schools as well. And there's also great, schools like Cheverus and Waynfleet and some of the other opportunities. But the reality is, if we take advantage of everything Portland has, Portland will be, in my opinion, one of the best cities in the world to live in.
Yeah, and it's already a great city, but it's going to get better.
Right.
Fred, in closing, any final thoughts?
No, I've had great experiences with the Boulos company. I'm a real estate broker myself. I have my own firm, but I also interface and work with the Boulos company, and I've had great results when you, Greg, have represented me, and I have a lot of confidence in your team, and it's nice when you can be friends and work together, and it's been a special relationship, and I see it growing in the future, and so it's kind of exciting to look to the future and keep growing.
Well, Fred, thanks for those kind comments. The check's in the mail.
I hope so.
Thanks.
Appreciate
the plug. Well, that's it for the first ever Boulos Company podcast. Special thanks to Fred Forsley for being my guest. You can learn more about Fred Forsley at Facebook, FFORSLEY, that's F Forsley. Instagram, Fred M. Forsley. And if you'd like to learn more about the Boulos Company, please be sure to visit us at www.boulos.com or find us on Facebook and LinkedIn by searching for The Boulos Company. And on Instagram and Twitter, we can be found by typing in at The Boulos Co. And if you want to know the secret to owning real estate, it's pretty simple. Just be sure to outlive your debt.